Most people think their life isn't changing because they don't have enough time, enough money, enough support, or enough luck. But that's not the truth. The real reason your life isn't changing is much simpler and much harder to face. It's because you are getting exactly what you are tolerating. Human beings don't change when they see the light. They change when they feel the heat. As long as staying the same feels safer, easier, or more comfortable than changing, nothing will happen. You can watch all the videos, read all the books, make all the plans, but if the pain of staying the same isn't greater than the pain of change, your life will remain exactly where it is. Your brain is wired for survival, not success. It's designed to keep you safe, familiar, and comfortable, even if that comfort is slowly destroying your potential. That's why you keep repeating patterns you promised yourself you would stop. That's why you know what to do, but you don't do what you know. Knowledge is not power. Action is power. The real problem is not lack of ability. It's lack of standards. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. Whatever you accept in your relationships, your health, your finances, and your mindset becomes your identity. And once something becomes your identity, your nervous system fights to protect it, even if it's limiting you. If you want your life to change, you must change what you decide is no longer acceptable. Not someday. Not when it's convenient. Now, change begins the moment you draw a line in the sand and say, this ends today. When your standards rise, your behavior rises to meet them. But standards alone are not enough. You must condition your body, not just your mind. Your emotions control your actions, and your emotions come from what you focus on and the meaning you give things. Change your focus, change your meaning, and you change your state. And when you change your state consistently, your habits follow. The final key is commitment without negotiation. Most people are interested in change, but interested people make excuses. Committed people make progress. When you remove the option to quit, your brain finds a way to win. Your life isn't changing because you haven't decided that it must. The moment you decide, with absolute certainty, that this is who you are now, everything begins to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you do. And when you change, everything around you has no choice but to follow. You are getting the results you are willing to tolerate, whether you admit it or not. Every area of your life is a reflection of what you have decided is acceptable. The level of energy you live with, the quality of your relationships, the state of your finances, the condition of your body, all of it mirrors the standards you enforce or fail to enforce. People don't stay stuck because they are incapable. They stay stuck because the current situation hasn't crossed the threshold of being unbearable. Comfort, even painful comfort, becomes familiar, and familiarity feels safe to the nervous system. When you tolerate being disrespected, you teach people how to treat you. When you tolerate low energy, you condition your body to operate at that level. When you tolerate excuses, you build a life filled with reasons instead of results. Nothing in your life is happening by accident. It is happening by agreement, often a silent one you made long ago and keep renewing every day through inaction. Most people wait for motivation, clarity, or confidence before they raise their standards. But standards don't rise because of emotion, they rise because of decision. The moment you decide that something is no longer acceptable, your perception shifts. You start seeing opportunities you ignored, solutions you dismissed, and behaviors you once justified. What you once endured suddenly feels impossible to live with. The most dangerous form of tolerance is the kind you rationalize. You tell yourself it's temporary, that others have it worse, that now is not the right time. These stories protect you from discomfort, but they also trap you in the same results year after year. Your brain will always choose certainty over possibility unless you interrupt the pattern with a stronger decision. Raising your standards means you stop negotiating with the part of you that wants to stay small. It means you act even when it feels inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unfamiliar. It means you no longer measure your actions by how you feel in the moment, but by who you are committed to becoming. The life you want is on the other side of what you refuse to tolerate, and the moment that refusal becomes absolute, your behavior begins to align without force or struggle. Change only happens when pain outweighs comfort, and this is the part most people don't want to hear. Human behavior is driven by a simple force, the need to avoid pain and seek pleasure. As long as staying the same feels less painful than changing, the mind will protect the familiar, even if that familiarity is slowly draining your potential. You can want a better life, visualize it, talk about it, but if the discomfort of change feels greater than the discomfort of staying where you are, nothing will move. Comfort is not peace. Comfort is predictability. The brain would rather stay in a situation it knows how to survive than risk uncertainty, even if that uncertainty holds growth. That's why people stay in unfulfilling jobs, draining relationships, and destructive habits. The pain is known, managed, and expected. Change introduces the unknown, and the unknown triggers fear even when it offers freedom. Real transformation begins when the emotional leverage shifts. When the pain of staying the same becomes personal, immediate, and intense, action becomes inevitable. This pain is not just frustration, it's the realization that time is being lost, potential is being wasted, and life is moving forward without permission. When you associate enough pain with your current patterns, your brain stops defending them. Most people try to change through willpower, but willpower is fragile. It collapses under stress and fatigue. Pain, however, is powerful. When the consequences of staying the same become heavier than the fear of change, behavior changes naturally. This is why breakthroughs often come after moments of crisis, loss, or deep dissatisfaction. The pain becomes a signal, not an enemy. You don't have to wait for life to break you to create that leverage. You can consciously stack the reasons why change must happen now. You can focus on the long-term cost of inaction instead of the short-term discomfort of action. When you make the pain of staying the same vivid and the pleasure of change compelling, your nervous system shifts its priorities and action stops being a struggle and starts becoming a necessity. Knowledge means nothing without massive action, and this is where most people deceive themselves. They believe that understanding something is the same as applying it. They watch, read, listen, and nod in agreement, mistaking recognition for transformation. But insight without execution does not change a life. It only creates the illusion of progress while everything stays the same. You don't get rewarded for what you know, you get rewarded for what you consistently do. The mind loves collecting information because it feels productive without being uncomfortable. Learning gives a hit of certainty and control, while action demands vulnerability and effort. This is why people become experts in ideas they never live. They know what they should do, they just don't do it. And over time, this gap between knowing and doing erodes confidence, creating self-doubt and frustration. Action is the bridge between potential and reality. It is through action that clarity appears, not before. Waiting to feel ready is a trap because readiness is the result of movement, not the requirement for it. Confidence does not come from thinking about action. It comes from taking action and surviving the experience. Every step forward conditions your nervous system to believe that change is possible. Massive action does not mean reckless movement. It means decisive, committed movement. It means doing more than what feels comfortable, more than what feels reasonable in the moment. Small actions create small results. But massive action interrupts old patterns and builds momentum fast. Momentum changes identity, and identity drives behavior. Most people underestimate how much action is required because they overestimate the power of intention. Good intentions don't rewire habits. Repetition does. The brain learns through experience, not theory. When you act consistently, even imperfectly, you send a signal to your system that this is who you are now. The moment you stop negotiating with yourself and start acting despite fear, fatigue, or uncertainty, everything begins to shift. Action collapses doubt, breaks emotional patterns, and forces growth. When action becomes your default response instead of thinking, your life stops being a concept and starts becoming a lived experience. Your standards shape your identity and your future more than your goals ever will. Goals are what you aim for, but standards are what you live by. You don't always achieve your goals, but you always live in alignment with your standards. Whatever you consistently accept becomes your baseline, and that baseline quietly defines who you believe you are. Over time, this identity becomes a powerful force, directing your choices without conscious thought. Identity is not something you declare once. It is something you reinforce daily through behavior. When your standards are low, you may set ambitious goals, but your actions will pull you back to what feels normal. When your standards are high, even ordinary days produce extraordinary results because your behavior aligns automatically. You no longer rely on motivation, you rely on expectation. You expect more from yourself, and that expectation shapes your decisions. Most people confuse standards with rules. Rules are external and negotiable. Standards are internal and non-negotiable. A rule says you should exercise. A standard says you are the kind of person who moves their body daily. When standards become part of your identity, discipline disappears because the behavior feels natural. You are not forcing yourself to act. You are simply being who you have decided to be. Raising your standards often feels uncomfortable because it threatens the identity you have been protecting. Your nervous system resists anything that challenges the familiar, even if the familiar is limiting. This is why change feels difficult at first. You are not just changing behavior, you are redefining who you are. Every time you follow through, you strengthen that new identity. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you reinforce the old one. The future you want is not created by one big decision, but by hundreds of small decisions made at a higher standard. When you decide what you will no longer tolerate from yourself, your environment, and others, your life begins to reorganize. Opportunities align, relationships shift, and habits evolve because they must match the person you are becoming. When standards rise, identity evolves, and when identity evolves, the future cannot remain the same. Emotional state controls behavior and habits more than logic ever will. You can have the best plans in the world, but if your emotional state is weak, scattered, or overwhelmed, your behavior will reflect it. People don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they are operating in an emotional state that makes follow-through difficult. Your state determines how you interpret situations, how much energy you have, and what actions feel possible in the moment. Every decision you make is filtered through your emotional state. When you feel confident and energized, challenges feel manageable. When you feel tired or stressed, the same challenges feel impossible. This is why people break promises to themselves, not because the goal is wrong, but because their state is mismanaged. You cannot create peak results from a depleted state. Your emotional state comes from three primary sources: physiology, focus, and meaning. The way you move your body affects the way you feel instantly. Shallow breathing, Slouched posture and low-energy movements signal weakness to the nervous system. Strong posture, deep breathing, and deliberate movement signal strength and capability. Change the body and you change the mind. Focus is the second driver. What you consistently focus on expands. When you focus on problems, you feel powerless. When you focus on solutions, you feel resourceful. Your brain cannot hold fear and purpose at the same intensity at the same time. Directing your focus is not about ignoring reality. It is about choosing what you empower. Meaning is the final lever. Two people can experience the same event and feel completely different because they give it different meaning. When you label something as failure, you feel defeated. When you label it as feedback, you feel motivated. Meaning shapes emotion, and emotion drives action. When you learn to consciously manage your state, habits stop being a battle. You no longer rely on willpower, you rely on alignment. You create conditions where the right actions feel natural and the wrong actions feel uncomfortable. Master your emotional state and behavior follows automatically because habits are not built by force, they are built by feeling and repetition. True transformation requires commitment without negotiation, and this is where the difference between dreamers and achievers becomes clear. Most people are interested in change, but interest is weak. Interest disappears when things get uncomfortable, inconvenient, or uncertain. Commitment is different. Commitment removes alternatives. When there is no backup plan, the mind stops looking for excuses and starts finding solutions. Negotiation with yourself is the silent killer of progress. You promise to act, then you debate, delay, and justify why today is not the right day. Each negotiation weakens self-trust. Over time, your words lose meaning to your own nervous system and motivation fades. When commitment is absolute, negotiation ends, the decision is already made, and action becomes the only option. Commitment creates clarity. When you decide without conditions, your focus sharpens. Energy that was once spent on doubt and hesitation is redirected toward execution. Fear doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls behavior. You act not because you feel ready, but because you have decided who you are and what you stand for. Most people wait for certainty before committing, but certainty is the reward of commitment, not the requirement. You build belief by acting in alignment with your decision, not by waiting to feel confident. Every time you follow through, you strengthen your identity as someone who does what they say. That identity compounds over time and becomes a source of unstoppable momentum. Commitment also demands sacrifice. Something must be given up to make space for growth. Old habits, old stories, old comforts cannot coexist with a new standard of living. This loss often feels painful, but it is also liberating. You are no longer carrying what no longer serves you. When commitment is without negotiation, consistency becomes natural. You stop relying on moods, motivation, or external validation. Your actions are driven by values, not emotions. This is where discipline transforms into freedom. The life you want is not created by a single intense moment, but by sustained commitment expressed through daily actions that reinforce who you have decided to become.